their time. Some words have a meaning that simply can't be changed, even by a majority of politicians. That's what this whole idea of individualism is all about. Childbirth is one such word. You know, there are two ways in which you become a part of a family. You are either born into that family or you're adopted. Once you're a member of the family, you have all the rights of all your siblings. How you get there is one of two ways. It makes no sense to insist that the definition of adoption be changed to childbearing. Well, we don't want to offend anybody, and we don't want to be in any way discriminatory, so adoption is now changed to mean childbearing. We just changed the name of it. You can't change reality just by changing names and words, even if you're trying to accomplish something that you think is very good. It's one of the reasons why you'll see the church engaged in a lot of elements today, a lot of arguments today that have to do with the basic relational order of creation, of the natural law, of a natural moral order. Someone once said to me in this discussion, you want to make sure that you know the difference between a rock and water when you're changing the words, because both you and the fire department need to know what water means if your house is on fire. That's what this discussion is all about. Individualism cannot take precedence over the very reality of our experience as human beings. But what do we bring to all of this? What does the new evangelization mean for you and me? What's the vision we bring? If you open the Gospel of Matthew and you start reading in the 5th chapter, the Sermon on the Mount, and you go through those first 3 chapters, 5, 6, and 7, you'll see, and all of you are very familiar with it, a vision of life that truly inspires what has been a part of our history, our culture, our civilization for centuries. We hear of a new way of life and how it involves the merciful, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, those who mourn, peacemakers, the poor in spirit. Here we learn that we're supposed to be salt for the earth, a light on the lampstand. And later in that same gospel, we hear the extraordinary dictum that we should even see in the face of others, the face of Jesus. We're challenged to envision a world where the hungry are fed, the thirsty are given drink, the stranger is welcomed, the naked are clothed, and most amazingly of all, sins are forgiven and you can be promised life everlasting. This is the vision. This is the vision of a Christian, of a follower of Christ. This is what we bring to 2011. And God is calling his church today to renew her efforts for the salvation of everyone. This is what makes this the time of the new evangelization. I was invited some time ago to go down to St. Stephen's Church on Pennsylvania Avenue. Some of you may be familiar with it. That church serves as the church for the campus ministry program at George Washington University, since we don't have a real campus church. I was invited to come and do the early Sunday night Mass. 8:30. And you all know that there's a much more convenient Mass for you. Anyway, I went, and the chaplain said, you know what we're going to do to make sure that there are people to come to your Mass? We'll cancel the late Mass, and maybe they'll all come to this Mass. And there was a good crowd. There were about 300 people. The chaplain got up and he said, I'd like to introduce the Archbishop. I already told him, you're not here because he's here. You're here because after Mass we have free pizza. And I said to myself, well, that's a fair enough description. The pizza will be cold when they're done with my homily. Anyway, when I went downstairs for the obligatory pizza, and there were all these young people like you that were there. Peter, it's nice to be referred to as a young person. They were all there, and so I sat down at a table, and we started talking. And this one, I said, how does it turn out that you're all here? I mean, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're going to church. And they said, it wasn't like this 2 years ago. The chaplain, Father Greg, is a very, very engaging, energetic young, like Father Frank, like the priest here on campus, just a very engaging priest. And he said to them, he said, we had 20. The first time he had Mass, 20 kids showed up. And he said to them, look, I'm declaring you to be the apostles to that campus over there. Just like the original apostles went out into a pagan world, you're going out into that campus. You find somebody and you bring them back next week, willingly. Bring them back next week so that we'll begin to grow. Well, it turns out that the young fellow seated right at my right said, I'm one of them. I'm one of them. And he said, my roommate said to me one day, would you consider going to church when I go to church next Sunday? And I said to him, yeah, I'm Catholic. I said, my roommate said, you are? And so he said, I'll go over with you. If you wake me, I'll go. And he said, I've been coming ever since. And then he pointed to someone else 2 tables over and said, and I brought him last time. Just asking other people, what would you think about taking a second look at your faith? What would you think about taking a second look at Mass? You know, we just had across the campus here at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, we had on the second Sunday of Lent and on the first Sunday of Lent, we had that ceremony where we invite the people who are going to come into the church at Easter. It's called the rite of election. They stand up and they say, I intend to do this. We had 1,100. We have to do it on 2 Sundays because by the time you get that many candidates and their sponsors and their friends, you pack that basilica twice. It's almost like for your graduation. You have a mob, a group. And I asked one of them when we were I greet each one of them because my job is to welcome them to the church. That's the bishop's job. I'll bet you often wondered what he does. Well, that's what I do. I welcome them to these Easter sacraments. And I said to one, what brought you to the church? And he had smiled, this big smile. His sponsor was alongside, and he said, she asked me. She asked me. It was that simple. She asked me, would you come to church? Now, I didn't have a chance because there's a long line of people coming through to inquire any more deeply into it. One of the reasons we have, and you've probably seen them on the buses, on the metro, even the ads on the radio, during this Lenten period, we have this, the light is on for you, inviting people to come back to confession. If you've drifted away, if you've been away for a long, long time, or even if you just haven't used it since you came on campus, you might want to consider getting back in touch with the Lord And that's what this new evangelization is all about. It's not something very elaborate. But what makes this the moment? What makes this a ripe moment? I think there are a lot of reasons. One, we have a lot more materials out there available to us if we're trying to do even a little refresher course ourselves on what is it that the Catholic Church believes? What is it that I should know? I remember when I was teaching a class once on the resurrection. At the end of the class, Tim, one of the students, you need to know Tim was not in my class because he was enthralled with the lecture series. Tim was in my class because Sarah was in my class. Tim waited, though, till the end of my lecture, and then he, after everybody left, he came up and he said, and this tells you how many years ago that class was, he said, "Father, I didn't want to embarrass you in class, but you said in class that Jesus came back from the dead." I said, "Tim, this whole class was on the resurrection. If you had read the chapter or even had listened," he said, no, I listened. "And you said he came back, body and everything." I said, "Tim, that's what the resurrection is all about." He said, "Do we believe that?" I said, "Yes, we believe that." Where would I find more about that? Today, if any of us have those questions, do we believe that? Do we believe this stuff about the Eucharist? Do we believe this stuff about the resurrection? Do we believe this stuff about new life? Now we have easily accessible tools. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, the United States Catholic Catechism for Adults, closer to home, the Catholic Way. It's not for sale here, but we can make it available to you. All of these things are easy tools for us to refresh our faith. But there's another thing that we also can be very aware of. You know, today, trying to be of service to others, you know, all the service opportunities we have, trying to care for people in need, all the outreach that's available, you know, that's a wonderful way to put into practice the gospel that says you are your brother or sister's keeper. You do have those responsibilities, but it's an opening onto that whole gospel that says, why would I want to do that? The social justice issues of our day are an opportunity for us simply to recognize that the Catholic Church and its teaching has helped to influence the development of most of the social justice issues in our country in the past century. But only faith can provide the conviction that our work for justice actually endures beyond the moment. Finally, if you look around, I think you'll see among young people like yourselves a sense that this is a very different time than 20 years ago. This is a very different moment. I think you have the advantage that some of us simply didn't have. You have the advantage of a perspective that says, looking back, you know, not all of that stuff about getting rich and having lots of things and being powerful is really the answer to everything. You have the advantage of looking and seeing, you know, there is more. When you ask that basic question of yourself, how shall I live? You're in a position to hear lots of very good voices saying, there's a lot more. And that more is found in the gospel, where Jesus simply reminds